Hi there, and welcome back to Episode 4 in Unit 1, Nutrients and Digestion. Again, a rather long series of video lectures, but we have to lay down a great foundation so that we can build on it for the rest of the course. In this video episode, we're going to be talking about the ruminant digestive tract. So we'll start up in the mouth again. It's important to recognize that in the ruminant mouth, there's no upper incisors. So different than you and I, they just have a hard palate at the top. So a cow, whenever it's out grazing, is simply going to clamp down on leaves of grass and rip them out of the ground and utilize their tongue to bring it in. They do have upper and lower molars, but they don't match up, so they grind side to side in order to kind of grind feeds down into smaller size, kind of that lateral shredding motion for feed particle size reduction. Their saliva is also quite different, almost continuous flow of saliva, especially when they're ruminating or eating, which cattle will make 12 to 15 gallons of saliva a day that flows down into the rest of the digestive tract. Not only does it lubricate and soften feeds, but it also provides a little bit of nitrogen and also some buffering salts that help keep the digestive tract properly balanced in terms of pH, or at least we hope so. We'll start first after we get material down the esophagus into the reticulum or the honeycomb, kind of a common opening between the reticulum and the rumen. And the reticulum helps kind of direct traffic, sending feedstuff either to the rumen or to the omasum, dependent upon how digested it is. Mucosal lined walls and very, very muscular type structure with no enzymatic secretions here. It's just simply moving feed and also catching any foreign material. So if your cow would have accidentally consumed a bolt or a nut or worse yet, a screw, it would most likely drop out into the bottom of the reticulum and hopefully hang out there and not cause any problem. The reticulum is the muscular structure that helps gather feedstuff and eject it back up the esophagus for regurgitation and for them to chew their cud. They do that so that they can further reduce particle size, add additional mucus and saliva and buffer to that material, and make it more digestible. Here's a close-up picture of what the reticulum looks like, and hopefully you can see why they call it the honeycomb. If you were handling a piece of this tissue, you would not be able to stick your finger through it. It's that thick and muscular. Next is the rumen, and a lot of material here to talk about. Again, huge muscular compartment, and takes up basically from the shoulder to the hip bone on the entire left side of the animal. Contains a lot of papillae, gives it that shag carpet look, which you'll see in a slide here in a second, to increase surface area, capturing the volatile fatty acids and a few proteins and things of that nature. Its functions to both store feed, soak feed, physical breakdown, mixing. That rumen should contract about 3 times every minute in a cow, and therefore mixing the feed materials that are there. And there are billions of bacteria, protozoa that are in there in that anaerobic environment, helping break down feedstuffs and make that rumen work for the animal to make proteins, create energy that the animal can access, produces some water-soluble vitamins, makes amino acids, helps make proteins. And so the rumen bacteria are very, very important, and we're going to talk about those at a number of points through the class. The rumen isn't really fully functional until about week 6 to week 9 in the ruminant. So feeding them a high forage diet early on in life actually isn't that effective. There's some marginal research on that going on right now in order to help make that rumen function. You want it to function as soon as possible, but you don't want to feed it improperly because an animal cannot digest the feed stuff. The omasum is next. It's a spherical and very, very muscular structure. In an adult cow, it's about the size of a basketball. You'll hear it referred to sometimes as the leaves of the Bible. Again, works to reduce particle size of feed before it enters the rest of the gastrointestinal tract. There's a lot of different folds in there that have kind of pointy studs on them that help basically just grind feed down. Here is the shag carpet papillae of the rumen. Close-up picture of those. And increasing surface area, these things help capture volatile fatty acids or amino acids that are in the ruminal structure. The bottom of the rumen will look just like this, and kind of you can rub your hand across it much like you could a shag carpet. It's important to understand, though, as we feed these animals appropriately, to keep that rumen pH in a proper level. Normal rumen pH in a cow is about 6.2. It doesn't hurt too bad to get it up around 7 or just slightly above that neutral mark of 7. The rumen will be very happy and healthy for the most part up in there. But if you drop it down into the 5s, and especially if you get into the low 5s, it's not difficult at all if you feed a lot of grain to get an animal's pH to drop in their rumen down into that 4.8 to 5.2 range, which is very, very acidic. So think about how it feels like whenever you have heartburn. It's kind of like what happens into the rumen of the cow, and it'll actually burn these papillae and they'll fall off. And obviously that creates a lot of problem with digestibility and nutrient absorption whenever we burn some of these papillae off. So it's important to note that we feed the proper amount and ratio of forages and concentrates to ruminants to keep them healthy. Here are the leaves of the Bible, or the folds of the omasum, the next piece of the digestive tract. Again, the rumen and the reticulum and the omasum, you would really not be able to stick your finger through and poke through the wall of it. It's that muscular and strong. But the omasum, again, serving primarily for feed particle-sized digestion. It's a very dry environment. Lastly is the abomasum of the 4-compartment stomach setup. Again, first time that we see a glandular portion of the gastrointestinal tract, first time that you see enzymes and pepsins and things like and acids introduced. Again, very similar to the stomach of the non-ruminant, set up just that way with the fundic gland region at the top and the pyloric gland region at the end. And then finally, the small intestine and large intestine is exactly similar to the non-ruminant when we talk about the pig, for example. Nothing really markedly different, so no point in me readdressing those same areas, duodenum, ileum, and jejunum, and their functions, which is, again, primarily nutrient absorption. So the specialties of the ruminant gastrointestinal tract, first thing we'll look at is the esophageal groove. This groove is kind of a flap of skin at the bottom of the esophagus that can direct feed ingredient into the lower digestive tract, the omasum and the abomasum. And this is, generally speaking, we're talking about water and milk. As you can imagine, if you allow milk to ferment, it doesn't particularly have a good aroma and certainly wouldn't feel good in your stomach as it was fermenting. So a nursing ruminant or a milk-drinking ruminant, we want to direct that milk right to the lower gut and let it get to work right away instead of let it sit in the rumen and ferment, therefore losing a lot of efficiency of nutrient breakdown. So the esophageal groove is responsible for making that happen. Rumination is the other main specialty of the ruminant. It allows that animal to eat a lot of feed at one time and then retire to a more comfortable place, lay down and rechew it all and do all the digestion later. That way they can load up on a whole bunch of feed and then go lay down and digest it all. Oftentimes rumination is stimulated by particle size, so you need some forage, some longer stem material in order to create that scratching sensation for the animal to have that reverse peristaltic reaction, eject a bolus back up the esophagus for them to be able to rechew via that contraction of the rumen and the reticulum. The cud primarily is forage. You'll see very little grain in a bolus of cud. It's usually the longer stem forage components, whether it's grass or hay or corn silage or something like that. Cattle, for example, are going to ruminate about 8 hours a day. And if you don't allow them enough time to do that, or you find that they aren't, we probably have some reductions in productivity occurring that we need to investigate. So some ration problems. The rumination process is regurgitation, remastication, resalivation, and then reswallowing. The ruminant also eructates or belches. And because we have bacterial fermentation going on in the rumen, one of the byproducts of fermentation obviously is gas production. And so the rumen contracts, forces that gas out the esophagus, and that animal belches. Now, if that can't happen, we have this really bad phenomenon called bloat, whenever gas cannot escape. So the rumen just distends and enlarges, blows up kind of like a balloon on the left side of the animal until either she's able to pass that gas or we have some medical intervention in order to release the gas so that she doesn't die, because she would of asphyxiation. So that's eructation. Now, we do have to cover a little bit the avian species here. They are obviously a little bit different in the mouth. Of course, they have no teeth and limited salivary glands and a fixed tongue. So quite different than the previous two that we've talked about, digestive tracts. The esophagus, again, includes a crop, a little bit of storage in the esophageal region, but very limited breakdown. And there's a little bit of fermentation in some species here that goes on with birds. The proventriculus is in the upper part of the poultry digestive system and starts to introduce some of those acids that are important, hydrochloric acid and pepsins. The gizzard, again, that grinding mill that the chicken and turkey and poultry are known for, the primary site of particle size reduction. So it's very, very muscular, contracting about every 20 to 30 seconds. Really no enzymes here, but they do need some grit to help with that grinding function. So that's why if you're feeding chickens at home, you typically have to include some oyster shell to provide that grit for them. If you have chickens that are roaming free range out in your backyard, they will occasionally pick up rocks. That's what it's for. And then their small intestine and large intestine, again, very similar to what we've talked about with the other species. So here's a dissected chicken digestive system, so you can see where all of those structures are located. Okay, we're going to kind of finish up here with nutrient digestion. Again, we got to convert feeds into forms that can be absorbed and utilized from the gastrointestinal tract. And again, just reviewing the 5 major areas where digestive enzymes are secreted into the GI is the mouth, except for the ruminant, the stomach, the gastric area, the pancreas, the duodenum and upper small intestine, the liver, and then the intestine. The absorption from a summary standpoint, again, most of the nutrient absorption from digestive products gets into the blood and the lymph system in the lower 2/3 of the small intestine, primarily by osmosis through semipermeable membranes. And that activity, that action is either by diffusion, so high concentration area to low. So if you can imagine, if we just had a meal, the amount of, let's pick a mineral, calcium, that would be now all of a sudden in your small intestine, once everything is broken down, would be higher inside the small intestine than outside of the small intestine. So your body will allow that material to diffuse and kind of equal itself out from high concentration to low. Or your body will pull things in via active transport. So those villi that are in your small intestine will essentially reach out and grab a amino acid or a sugar and pull those molecules right in to the blood and lymph tissue area so that they can be utilized. Those things both cost energy, though. Again, remembering back to episode 1, we talked about ATP. All of those digestive functions require energy to complete. Again, all of these things occur primarily in the small intestine and secondarily in the large intestine. And except for when we talk about the ruminant, volatile fatty acid absorption occurs primarily in the rumen. So really, really important that we have that occurring there. But again, absorption in the duodenum and the jejunum of carbohydrates, free amino acids, free fatty acids, di and tripeptides, minerals, vitamins, etc. So that's going to wrap up the 4-episode segment that I have here for Unit 1, Nutrients and Digestion. Again, I hope you took great notes through this area, asked excellent questions through Unit 1, and really make the assessment tools and case study that we're going to dive into in Unit 1 work for you to lay a great foundational block to build upon for the rest of the course. I look forward to seeing you in class.